You guys, listen. Cardi B is suing Tasha K's husband. I repeat, the husband. Not Tasha. The husband. And not for talking. Not for a podcast clip. Not for a tweet. For money. For an entire company. For property. For a paper trail that allegedly stretches from Georgia all the way down to Florida. And if what these court filings are saying turns out to be even half true, this is no longer a defamation story. This is a forensic accounting story. This is a shell game story. And the gag? The street's been whispering about this for 2.5 years and nobody was listening. Hold on. Sit down. Lock the door. We pulled up the receipts. Okay. Let me set the stage for the new folks, because I know some of y'all are just walking in here cold. Back in 2022, a federal jury in Atlanta sat down, looked at the evidence, and decided Tasha K had defamed Cardi B. Not may have. Not allegedly, maybe, possibly. Decided. On the record. With a verdict. $3.9 million in damages. That number is important. Hold on to it. Tattoo it on your forehead if you have to, because we are coming back to it. Then Tasha did what a whole lot of people do when a number that big lands on their head. She filed for bankruptcy. And in bankruptcy court, that 3.9 got renegotiated, reshaped, reduced, restructured, all the words you can stuff in a sentence. It came down to $1.2 million on a payment plan. Cardi signed. Tasha signed. The judge signed. Everybody went home. Cool. Fine. Done. Except it wasn't done. Because part of that bankruptcy deal, and this is the piece nobody talks about enough, was a non-disparagement clause. In plain English, Tasha agreed not to keep poking the bear. Not Cardi. Not Cardi's family. Not the people Cardi loves. Don't bring her name up sideways. Don't mention Offset and his business. Don't drag the kids in. Behave. That was the deal. And for a little while, it kind of held. Kind of. Until the streets started saying Tasha was right back at it, talking about Offset, talking about gambling, talking about Cardi-adjacent everybody. And Cardi's lawyer, Lisa Moore, and let me just say it, Lisa Moore is built different, the woman is a problem, in the best way. Lisa Moore took it back to the judge. May 6th. The judge ruled in Cardi's favor on the enforcement piece. Tasha got told to remove the videos, pay the legal fees, and the court even sanctioned her attorneys. Sanctioned. The attorneys. Which is wild, because attorneys catching strays in their own case is not a thing that happens on a Tuesday. So that was the first earthquake. We covered that. We talked about it. We thought, okay, the dust is going to settle, Tasha's going to take the videos down, the world keeps spinning. But baby. The dust didn't settle. The dust got picked up off the floor and thrown directly into the next chapter. Because today, we are finding out that Cardi is not just enforcing the old judgment. She filed a brand new lawsuit. In federal court. In Florida. Naming Tasha's husband by name. And naming a company. A company most of you have never heard of. A company called Yelen Entertainment LLC. Write that down. Yelen Entertainment LLC, because that name is about to do a lot of heavy lifting in this story. Now, let me give you my opinion and then you tell me what you think, because we go back and forth on this channel, that's how we do it. My opinion? This is the smartest legal move Cardi B has made in this entire saga. And I am not saying that to gas her up. I'm saying it because I have been watching this case since before some of y'all even knew Tasha K had a husband. And the moment I saw the words Yelen Entertainment in a federal complaint, I sat up. Because that, my friends, that is a fraudulent transfer claim. That is a successor liability claim. That is a piercing the corporate veil claim. And those 3 words, fraudulent transfer, those are the magic words that turn a $1.2 million settlement back into a $4 million judgment with sprinkles on top. Hear me out. Let me read you what the complaint allegedly says, and then I'm going to walk you through it like Memento. Like Sherlock Holmes. Like we are sitting at the kitchen table connecting post-it notes with red string. Because that is what this story deserves. According to the filing, and this is reported by our friends over at Girls Are Fighting on Instagram, who, shout out, are doing the Lord's work, Cardi alleges that KB Studios, which was the business previously tied to Tasha's media operation, was stripped. Stripped of its assets. Stripped of its income streams. Stripped right after the verdict came down. And then, almost like clockwork, almost like somebody had this thing pre-drafted in a Google Doc, a brand new company appears. Yelen Entertainment. Doing the same kind of work. Managing the same content. Collecting the same revenue. From the same online platforms. Tied to the same blogger. Run by, allegedly, Tasha's husband. Now. Take a breath with me. Take a sip of water. Because if that is true, that is not a small thing. That is the textbook, page 1, chapter 1 definition of what lawyers call a fraudulent conveyance. You take a company that owes a judgment, you scoop the meat out of it, you drop the meat into a new company that is owned by your spouse, and then you turn to the creditor with empty pockets and go, I ain't got it. That is the move. That is the entire move. And the law, for 200 years, has had a name for that move. And the name is fraud. But wait. Wait. Because there is more. There is so much more. The filing also references, and this is the part where my eyebrow went up so high it touched my hairline, a property transfer in Georgia. Allegedly without fair compensation. Now, do y'all remember? Do y'all remember when Tasha sold the house in Georgia and moved to Florida? I remember. I covered it. We all kind of laughed because Florida felt like a vibe. The sunshine, the palm trees, the beach. But now, in retrospect, knowing what we know, with the receipts in our hands, that move is looking less like a vacation and more like a strategy. Because what does Florida have that Georgia doesn't? Florida has some of the most generous debtor protection laws in the United States. Florida has a homestead exemption that is, no exaggeration, one of the most aggressive in the country. You buy a primary residence in Florida, and creditors can have a real hard time touching it. Real hard. Like, banging on bulletproof glass hard. And listen, I am not saying that is why she moved. I am not making that accusation. I am just telling you what every single asset protection attorney in this country already knows. Florida is where you go when you don't want to be found. By creditors. By judgments. By the bill collector named Cardi B. Now, let me pause and play fair. Tasha has said, on the record, multiple times, joked about it, made it into a whole running bit, she ain't got it. She has straight up said, on camera, she does not have $4 million. And honestly? I believe her. I do. Here is the thing about YouTube money, and I keep telling y'all this, YouTube money is not what it was. The OG creators will tell you. The AdSense ain't AdSense ANG the way it used to. You can have 1 million subscribers and still be staring at a light bill like, So I do not think Tasha has $4 million sitting in a safe under her bed. I do not think she has gold bars in a Swiss vault. I do not think she has cash buried in the backyard like a pirate. That is not what this case is about. This case is about, and this is the piece you need to understand, this case is about whether the value of her work, the value of the content, the value of the brand, the value of the platform, the value of the subscribers, the value of the merch, the value of the future earnings, was moved out of one entity that owed Cardi money and into another entity that does not, on paper, owe Cardi anything. That is the question. That is the whole question. And that is why this lawsuit is so dangerous. Because here is the part the lawyers know that the public doesn't. When a court finds a fraudulent transfer, the remedy is not give the money back. The remedy can be, and pay attention, to unwind the transfer entirely. As if it never happened. To hold the new company liable for the old debt. And in some cases, in some really juicy cases, to hold the individual people personally liable. Personally liable. Which means a husband. Which means a wife. Which means the people behind the LLC. Not just the LLC itself. The humans. The people who signed the paperwork. The people who allegedly knew what was going on. Cardi's complaint is explicitly asking the court for that. Explicitly. She is asking the court to undo the alleged transfers, to hold the new company responsible for the judgment and, quote-unquote, potentially hold individuals personally liable if the court finds they used the business structure to avoid payment. Read that sentence again. Read it slow. That is a sentence with teeth. Okay. Let me get into the part that the streets are saying. Because the streets are always saying something, and the streets, more often than not, are correct. The streets are saying this lawsuit was inevitable. The streets are saying Cardi's investigators have been digging since 2022. The streets are saying when Tasha kept popping up online, joking about the money, taunting, doing podcasts, doing lives, doing videos with her face on the thumbnail of a Cardi B headline, every single one of those moments, somewhere in a law office in New York or Atlanta or Miami, somebody was screen recording it. Somebody was timestamping it. Somebody was filing it in a folder labeled Exhibit A. And the streets are saying that the moment Tasha referenced Offset and the alleged gambling stuff, that was the trigger. That was the violation that gave Lisa Moore the green light to go scorched earth. And once you go scorched earth on a defendant, you don't just hit the defendant. You hit the spouse. You hit the company. You hit the property. You hit anything with their fingerprint on it. That is what scorched earth means. Now let's talk about Yelen Entertainment LLC for a minute. Because I know somebody in the comments is about to ask, well, what is Yelen even? What does the company do? Who runs it? And the honest answer is, on paper, very little is publicly known about Yelen. Which is itself a clue. Because when a brand new entertainment company appears out of nowhere, doing the exact same business as a previously sued entity, run by the spouse of the previously sued person, and the public-facing footprint of that company is functionally invisible, what does that tell you? It tells you what every forensic accountant in the country already suspects. It tells you the company may exist on paper for the specific purpose of holding revenue streams away from the creditor. And again, I am not the judge. I am not the jury. I am Tisa. I am telling you what the filing alleges and what any reasonable person would side-eye after reading it. The other thing, and this is something nobody is talking about, and I am going to be the first to put it on your radar, so remember where you heard it, the timing. The timing of Yelen's creation. Cardi's filing apparently alleges that Yelen Entertainment was created shortly after the 2022 verdict. Shortly. Which in legal speak means weeks, maybe months. Not years. Not a decade. The proximity in time between the day a federal jury said you owe this woman $4 million and the day a brand new LLC pops up with the spouse's name attached to it, doing the exact same work, that proximity is, by itself, a piece of evidence. Because in fraudulent transfer law, courts look at something called badges of fraud. It's a real legal term. Look it up. Badges of fraud. And one of the biggest badges, the brightest, shiniest badge of them all, is the timing. Did the transfer happen right before or right after a big legal threat? If yes, badge. If the transfer was to an insider, a family member, a spouse, a business partner, badge. If the transferor kept enjoying the benefits of the property after the transfer, badge. If the transferor became insolvent right after the transfer, badge. And if you stack up enough badges, you don't even need a confession. You just need a judge. Now since I mentioned the badges, let me actually break a few of them down for you, because I promised I would teach the class and I keep my promises. There are roughly 11 of these things in most state statutes, modeled on the Uniform Voidable Transactions Act, and they read like a checklist somebody wrote specifically with this kind of case in mind. Badge 1, was the transfer made to an insider, like a family member or a spouse? Check the box. Badge 2, did the debtor retain possession or control of the property after the transfer? In a household where the husband and wife operate the same content brand, that one is going to get litigated hard. Badge 3, was the transfer concealed or hidden from creditors? If the new company was formed quietly, with minimal public footprint, you can see how that argument gets made. Badge 4, was the debtor sued or threatened with suit before the transfer happened? Federal jury verdict in 2022. So yes. Badge 5, was the transfer of substantially all the debtor's assets? If the income streams shifted entirely, that is a big check. Badge 6, did the debtor abscond, meaning physically leave the jurisdiction? Georgia to Florida. Badge 7, did the debtor remove or conceal assets? That is the entire theory of the case. Badge 8, was the value received in exchange reasonably equivalent to the value of what was transferred? If the Georgia property got transferred for pennies on the dollar, that is bad. Badge 9, was the debtor insolvent at the time, or insolvent shortly after? The bankruptcy filing kind of answers that one. Badge 10, did the transfer happen right before a substantial debt was incurred? Order of operations matters. Badge 11, did the debtor transfer the essential assets of a business to a liener who then transferred them to an insider? Layered transactions, watch the chain. You see what I am saying? When you read these badges and then you read the complaint, they line up. They line up like a flight of dominoes somebody set up on purpose. And once a court sees that many dominoes, the case basically argues itself. You guys, let me know if y'all want me to do a whole deep dive on badges of fraud, because there are 11 of them under the Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, and I will absolutely sit here and walk through every single one of them like I'm teaching a college class. Just tell me in the comments. I will do it. I will pull out the whiteboard. I will dress like a lawyer. I will commit to the bit. Okay, back to the story. Back to the story. Because we are not done. We are nowhere near done. Cardi's attorney, Lisa Moore, again, queen behavior, I love her, I will defend her on this internet, is also separately asking the court to reinstate the original $3.9 million judgment in full. In full. Not the reduced 1.2 from the bankruptcy. The full 3.9. That request, according to the reporting, is still unresolved. It hasn't been ruled on yet. It is sitting on a judge's desk somewhere, waiting. And what that means, and this is the chess move within the chess move, is that even if the new lawsuit against the husband and Yelen doesn't recover a single dollar, Cardi could potentially still get the original judgment reinstated. Which means the 1.2 could balloon back up to 3.9. Plus interest. Plus legal fees. Plus the new sanctions. Plus the cost of the videos that had to be removed. Plus, and I cannot stress this enough, plus whatever the new lawsuit drags out of the husband and Yelen Entertainment. Are you doing the math with me? Are you adding it up? Because the number is getting bigger. The number was 4 million. Now the number is 4 million plus a fresh lawsuit plus the possibility of personal liability plus interest accrued over 4 years. That is no longer a YouTube money problem. That is a generational problem. And listen, I want to be fair to Tasha. I do. Because I am not in the business of standing on people's necks. Tasha has said she does not have it. She might genuinely not have it. The bankruptcy might have been real. The struggle might be real. The Florida move might genuinely have been about cost of living, weather, family, schools, any number of legitimate reasons. I am not the prosecutor. I am the commentator. But what I will say, and this is from the bottom of my heart, is that the smartest move, the absolute smartest move Tasha could have made after the 2022 verdict, was to never say Cardi B's name again. Not once. Not in passing. Not in a quote. Not in a screenshot. Not in a reaction video. Not in a podcast. Just delete the name from the vocabulary entirely. Pretend Cardi B doesn't exist on this earth. Because the moment you signed that non-disparagement clause in bankruptcy court, every single utterance, every single tag, every single subtle wink to the audience, becomes a potential brick that Cardi's lawyers can use to build a wall around your assets. And we are now watching that wall get built in real time. Brick by brick. Filing by filing. Hearing by hearing. And here is where I have to bring up something that has been bothering me. Bothering me. The non-disparagement clause did not just cover Cardi. It covered her family. Family is broad. Family is a wide net. Who is family? Offset, while he was the husband, was family. The kids are family. The mom is family. The sister, Hennessy, is family. Anybody Cardi considers close. Anybody she considers loved ones. And the moment Tasha allegedly started talking about Offset's gambling, the moment she allegedly started dragging family-adjacent topics into her content, that clause activated. Like a tripwire. Like a motion sensor. Like one of those red laser grid traps in a heist movie. Boop. You touched it. Now we are in court. And what we have learned through this whole saga is that Cardi does not bluff. Cardi B does not threaten. She does not subtweet. She does not wait for the apology. She files. She pays the retainer. She lets Lisa cook. That is the formula. And the formula keeps working. Now I want to talk about the husband for a second. Because the husband, and listen, I am being careful with names here because we are in the middle of active litigation and I am not trying to catch a defamation case myself, learn from the past, but the husband has, by association, been part of the brand for a long time. Behind the scenes. Behind the camera. Behind the LLC paperwork. Behind the corporate structure. And the streets have always said that the husband is the business mind of the operation. The streets have always said that the husband is the one who set up the original entities, who handled the deals, who managed the contracts, who built the back end. Which is normal. Lots of married couples run businesses together. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. But the moment the business gets sued, the moment a federal jury rules against you, the moment a judgment, most people who win a defamation case run out of money trying to collect on it. The judgment becomes a piece of paper they hang in a frame because they cannot afford the post-judgment investigation. Cardi can afford it. Cardi can afford private investigators, forensic accountants, real estate research, asset tracing services, the whole apparatus. And when you can afford the apparatus finds things. The apparatus pulls up the receipts. The apparatus is what produced the filing we are talking about today. And let me sit on that point for a second, because it is honestly the biggest unspoken lesson in this entire situation. Most defamation plaintiffs in this country win on paper and lose in reality. They get the verdict, they get the headline, they get the press release, and then 6 months later they are still trying to figure out how to actually get the money. Because the defendant goes radio silent, the defendant restructures, the defendant moves, the defendant lawyers up with a new firm specifically built for delay, and the plaintiff slowly bleeds out paying for enforcement until one day they go, you know what? Never mind, I'll take the loss. That is the most common ending to a story like this. Most people quit. Cardi did not quit. Cardi kept paying lawyers. Cardi kept paying investigators. Cardi kept showing up to hearings. For years deep. And that, more than anything, is why this case is different. Stamina is a weapon. Money is a weapon. Patience is a weapon. And when you have all three at the same time, you become the kind of plaintiff that defendants have nightmares about. And let me say something else about the entire apparatus, because honestly this part gets missed in the headlines. Forensic accountants do not work fast and they do not work cheap, but they work thorough. They reconstruct money trails from receipts you forgot you signed. They subpoena payment processors you stopped using years ago. They find the email where somebody said the quiet part on a Tuesday afternoon. That is the machine Cardi turned on. So now the question becomes, what happens next? What is the realistic outcome of this lawsuit? And let me give you 3 possible futures, because I love a good what if with y'all. Future number 1, Cardi wins the fraudulent transfer claim. The court unwinds the transfers. Yelen Entertainment becomes liable for the judgment. The husband faces personal exposure. The judgment is enforced against new assets. Tasha and the husband have to either pay or escalate. Future number 2, Cardi loses the fraudulent transfer claim because the documentation isn't there, because the husband can show legitimate business reasons for everything, because the Georgia property was sold for fair value, because Yelen Entertainment was created for unrelated reasons. In that scenario, Cardi walks away with sanctions, with the videos removed, with the original enforcement win, but no new money. Future number 3, they settle. Quiet settlement. Confidential terms. Tasha agrees to a much bigger payment over a much shorter timeline. Yelen agrees to certain restrictions, the property gets a lien on it, everybody signs an NDA on the NDA, and we never hear about it again on the public docket. My money, and I am being honest, my money is on a version of Future 3. Because litigation is expensive. Trial is uncertain. And both sides have reasons to want this quiet. But Future 1 is on the table. And Future 1 is the one where the ground shakes. Let me add a 4th future, because actually the more I think about it, the more I think there is one I missed. Future number 4, discovery becomes the story. Discovery, for the people who don't know, is the part of a lawsuit where both sides get to demand documents, emails, bank statements, contracts, text messages, everything. Discovery is where lawsuits really get won and lost. Because discovery surfaces stuff that nobody ever intended to come out. Discovery turns private conversations into court exhibits. Discovery is the reason your favorite reality star's text messages end up in TMZ. And in a case like this, where the entire theory is that money was moved from one entity to another, discovery means Cardi's lawyers get to look at every bank statement, every transfer document, every wire receipt, every contract between KB Studios and Yelen Entertainment, every payment to or from the husband, every property document related to Georgia, every Florida purchase agreement. Imagine all of that landing on a desk in a conference room in Miami. Imagine the things that would surface. Even if the case ultimately settles, the discovery alone could produce material that ends up shaping how this entire saga gets remembered. That is Future 4. And Future 4 might end up being the loudest one. Now I want to take a hard left turn for a second because something else has been rattling around in my head and I have to say it out loud. The relationship between Cardi B and Tasha K, on a human level, fascinates me. I have said this before, in a parallel universe, in an alternate timeline, in some Doctor Strange multiverse situation, those two women might have been allies. They might have been friends. They have more in common than people realize. They both came up off raw, unfiltered, unapologetic content. They both built audiences by saying what nobody else was willing to say. They both attracted incredible scrutiny. They both got dragged for things that had nothing to do with the actual issue at hand. They both built empires from scratch with no cosign, no industry plant fairy godmother, no nepotism. They are, in a strange way, mirror images of each other. One stayed in music and crossed into mainstream celebrity. One stayed in blog culture and built a media company. And then one defamed the other. And here we are. 4 years later. Still tangled up. Still in court. And probably still, somewhere in their hearts, kind of acknowledging that the other one is exactly the kind of force they used to admire. I don't know. That's just my read. But the reality is, we are not in that parallel universe. We are in this one. And in this one, Tasha allegedly broke an agreement. Tasha allegedly kept talking when she signed a paper saying she wouldn't. Tasha allegedly let her brand and her business move money in ways that look, to a federal court, like asset concealment. And Cardi, who has the receipts and the lawyer and the bandwidth, is following the paper trail wherever it leads. Even if it leads to a husband. Even if it leads to a Florida property. Even if it leads to a brand new LLC that just happened to spring up at the exact moment the old one got hit with a judgment. Okay, let me read y'all one more piece of this because I want everybody to be on the same page when this case starts getting bigger. The complaint, according to the reporting, alleges that income connected to Tasha was redirected through new accounts and structures after the judgment, making it more difficult to collect through standard enforcement methods like garnishment. Garnishment, for the people who don't know, is when a court tells your bank, your employer, or your payment processor, listen, this person owes money, we are siphoning a percentage off the top, send it to the creditor before it ever hits the debtor's hands. Garnishment is the most basic, most boring, most reliable enforcement tool there is. And if the allegations are true, the structure of Yelen Entertainment and the redirected accounts make garnishment functionally impossible. Because you cannot garnish income that is technically flowing into a different entity that is technically not the debtor. You cannot garnish a paycheck that is paid to the husband instead of Tasha. You cannot garnish revenue that lives in an LLC bank account in someone else's name. That, in plain English, is the gap that fraudulent transfer law was literally invented to close. The law is older than the United States. Look it up. The Statute of 13 Elizabeth. 1600 and something. Queen Elizabeth I. We pull up the receipts. Let me give you my final read on this, my real opinion, the thing I would say to a friend at a kitchen table over a glass of wine if the cameras were off. I think Tasha K is in real trouble. Not in a she's going to jail way. Bankruptcy, fraud, and fraudulent transfer are mostly civil matters with civil consequences. But in a her business model may not survive this way. Because what we are watching, in slow motion, in court filing after court filing, is the cost of not being able to do that. And that cost keeps going up. And listen, I want to also say something to the audience for a second. Because part of what keeps a story like this going is us. Us. The viewers. The clickers. The commenters. Every time Tasha drops a video about Cardi, and that video gets 100,000 views in 2 hours, that view count is the economic signal that pushes the next video to also be about Cardi. We are part of the loop. Not in a guilty way. We are not the ones in court. But our attention is the fuel. And if we, collectively, as a culture, as an audience, got bored of the Cardi versus Tasha cycle, the content engine that keeps producing it would slow down. So in a weird way, the most peaceful end to this story might come not from a courtroom but from us collectively going, okay, we have heard this song, let's pick a different track. I am including myself in this. I am here. I am making the video. I am part of the loop. I see the irony. But I would rather cover the legal mechanics, the asset tracing, the actual stakes, than just react to another podcast clip. That is the line I try to walk. Y'all let me know in the comments if I'm walking it well. There is one more thing I want to flag before we close, because I would feel weird not mentioning it. The optics. The optics of all of this. From the outside, this looks like a wealthy celebrity pursuing a less wealthy creator into financial ruin over a years-old story. I see how that reads. I see the take that is going to be hot on Twitter tomorrow. Cardi is being petty. Cardi has the money, leave the lady alone. It's just gossip, nobody died. I hear it. I get it. But the part that take leaves out is that there was a court case. There was a verdict. There was a settlement. There was a clause. There were rules. And the law does not have a "she has enough money already" exception. The law has an enforcement mechanism. And once you choose to use that mechanism, you have to use it all the way, because half using it is what creates the problem in the first place. So when people say Cardi should let it go, okay, but at what point do we say the legal system should also let everybody go? Either contracts mean something or they don't. Either verdicts mean something or they don't. Either non-disparagement clauses mean something or they don't. You cannot pick and choose based on who is more sympathetic. That is not how this works. That is not how any of this works. All right. All right. We have been at this a minute. Let me wrap up because I know some of y'all clicked on this expecting a 5-minute video and instead got a forensic accounting lecture. I love that for us. That is the channel. Welcome. Quick recap before we close out. 1. Cardi B has filed a new federal lawsuit in Florida, naming Tasha K's husband and a company called Yelen Entertainment LLC as defendants. 2. The lawsuit alleges that KB Studios, Tasha's previous entity, was stripped of its assets right after the 2022 verdict and that Yelen was created to absorb the same business operations. 3. The lawsuit also references a Georgia property transfer that allegedly happened without fair compensation, suggesting an attempt to move assets out of reach. 4. Cardi is asking the court to undo the transfers, hold Yelen liable for the judgment, and potentially hold individuals personally liable. 5. Cardi's attorney Lisa Moore is separately asking the court to reinstate the full $3.9 million judgment, which is still pending. 6. Tasha has already had to pay sanctions and remove videos under the earlier May ruling. 7. This whole thing is being framed by Cardi's team as an asset concealment case, and the legal phrase to remember is fraudulent transfer. 8. There is a reasonable chance this ends in a quiet settlement, but there is also a real chance it goes the distance and we see personal liability findings. 9. Even if the lawsuit itself stalls, the discovery process alone could surface material that reshapes the entire public narrative around this case. 10. The badges of fraud, as a legal framework, line up against the alleged facts in a way that should make any defense team very, very nervous. Either way, the financial pressure on Tasha and the household is increasing, not decreasing. That is the state of play. That is where we are at. For years into this, in 2026, still doing the same dance. Like I said earlier, everything that is old is new again. You guys, I am so curious what y'all think. Are you team Cardi should let it go, she has the bag, just move on? Are you team Cardi is 100% right to chase every dollar? Are you team Tasha got railroaded by the legal system? Are you team Tasha is reaping what she sowed? Or are you like me, kind of all over the place, sympathetic to the humans involved but also acknowledging that contracts mean contracts and consequences mean consequences? Let me know in the comments. I read them. I really do read them. I don't always reply, because there are a lot of you and only one of me, but I read them. And if you have any insider tea, any receipts, any documents, any tips on Yelen Entertainment that public records don't show, slide into the inbox. You know how it works. Anonymity guaranteed. We protect our sources. Hit the like button if you made it this far. Subscribe if you are new. Turn on the notification bell because I have a feeling we are going to be back here within a week, talking about whatever the next move is. Because both sides are too lawyered up, too publicly invested, and too stubborn to let this go quietly. There is going to be a response filing. There is going to be a motion to dismiss. There is going to be discovery. There is going to be deposition tea. There is going to be so much. And we are going to cover every minute of it. That's all I got for now. Stay safe. Stay petty. Pay your debts. I will talk to y'all later. Bye.